So, Jules, tell us about your first visit.
First visit.
Yeah.
First visit was awful. Was awful. Okay, so I remember on my first visit, my mum and dad and my sister came in and they were shocked because I didn't realise they did this and I didn't realise this happened. But the prison I was in, when the visitors come in, they have your picture.
What, your picture?
My picture on the screen, and they say, well, is this who you're coming to see? And my picture that they had obviously was my first moment in prison.
Cool.
Which I'd just been on the
sweatbox.
On the sweatbox for ages. I just got out, they quickly took my picture. I looked like a mess. Like it was a really bad picture. And clearly it was a bad picture because when they saw me, they were like, thank God you don't look like that picture. You look like that. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that you had a picture.
Yeah,
anyway, so yeah, it was a bit awful. How was yours?
Not as dramatic, but it was all right. I think it was just my mum. Yeah, my mum came up.
I am a bit of a drama queen.
Yeah. Well, you said it.
Just your mum?
Yeah, just my mum. That's nice. Hello and welcome back to Life After Prison, the Sit Down with Jules and Zach.
On each episode of this podcast, we are joined by a guest who shares their journey of life after prison or their experience of the criminal justice system. So today in the studio joining us, we have an artist who goes by the name of Gary Mansfield.
Hello,
Good
Gary.
afternoon.
Welcome to the studio. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for being here, man. We appreciate you
You're
taking
more than
time out.
welcome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. So Gary, you call yourself a born-again artist.
I did do, yeah.
Can you please explain to us what that means?
Well, that was more the fact that I'd already got into art when I was in prison. I was doing 14 for Class A drugs. Discovered art, got into art, and I wanted to be a normal artist that sort of painted, sculpted and drew in a traditional sense. Then someone gave me an art book that was like it had Damien Hirst in it, Tracey Emin. It was the sort of art that I used to say anyone can make. It's not art if I can make it, you know. And I read that book, and that overnight that made me want to be a conceptual artist because of the interest I found in that book. It was very inspiring. And that's where the born again artist come from, because I went in my prison cell one night wanting to be one sort of artist. And the very next morning I wanted to be something else.
That's crazy.
And what was that word?
Conceptual artist.
What does that mean, sorry?
It's the sort of art where it's not about the making of the art. The art is supposed to be a 3D representation of an idea or a concept.
Okay. Yeah. I feel that. I think that would be more my kind of cup of tea.
Yeah. And it looks easy to make.
But it's not.
No, it's because it's got to answer all the questions and even ask questions of the idea behind it.
So like an example of that would be like Damien Hirst's shark thing he's done, innit?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool, man. How did you first become like involved with art then? Like where was the first
Well,
instance?
I wanted to get involved with computers. I wanted to get on the computer class when I was in Swaleside.
Yeah.
And the queue was really long for it. But I found out that if you was in the education department, because I wasn't at the time, you could jump the queue a little bit for those waiting.
If he was on a course already.
Yeah, you can sort of, when someone leaves one, you can just dart across rather than have to be the next one in, you know. So there was a few different lessons going on there, but art was always the one you could mess about with in class, you know, and you didn't have to study. It weren't English or maths, you know. So I thought I'd go in there. One of my mates was in there. And it had a really inspirational tutor. He showed me a couple of ways to draw, but I couldn't do it. I'd never done art before. But then one of them sort of clicked. The way he showed me how to draw, it was an eye he was showing me this specific time. And it just worked. And then I went back and finished the portrait off that I was copying.
Wow.
And the look on his face when I showed him the portrait, because it looked like the person, you know. And then I thought, well, I could stomach this art, you know. It was
Wait, so you've never been into art?
Never.
Before you went to prison?
Never. Even
and
at school,
the
I
stuff
just
you
messed
make
about.
is incredible.
But if you give time to learn something, any subject, you become good in it after repetition, don't you?
Yeah.
And especially if you've got a little bit of passion for it as well. You know, you can do anyone can do anything, can't they?
That's true.
But your passion grew when you first did it in prison.
Yeah, and more so, I wrote to some artists while I was in there, and they replied. And throughout my sentence for the next 5.5 years, I had hundreds of artists writing to me while I was in.
How did that come about then?
Well, I'd fallen in love with art, but I didn't know where it could go because a guy from a council estate in my head wasn't an artist.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My idea of an artist was a white, middle-class, well-spoken man who spoke like a poet, not, you know, some bloke off a council estate in Dagenham, you know. So I just thought, well, I could imagine me having to do sign writing or tattooist. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but I didn't want that. I wanted to be an artist. And the tutor brought in something he'd recorded off the telly, and this program featured an artist each episode. We watched the first one, and that was just like the sort of artist I imagined, a guy called Patrick Hughes. But then afterwards, the second episode that he put on, they showed this artwork. It was a bit dark and mysterious, a little bit rough. It looked a bit London, a little bit gnarly from the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, you know. It looked like a little clip off of a film, it did, you know. And I thought, oh, I quite like that. And then the bloke started talking. And I can't remember his exact words, but he was like, my name's Ray Richardson. I'm from Woolwich, South East London. And I was like, man, he speaks like I do. And he's on telly. He's an artist. He must be famous if he's on telly, you know. And that was it. And at the end of the programme, I got the production company. So say it was, I'm just making this up, or I will definitely make one up. Yeah. Say it's Greenleaf Productions on Channel 4. So I wrote to his name was the first artist was Patrick Hughes. The second was Ray Richardson. I wrote to both of them artists, care of Greenleaf Productions, Channel 4, blah, 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 and said, I've seen you on telly, whatever. And then a certain amount of time later, they both replied.
That's nuts. How did you feel when they responded to you then?
Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. And more so the fact that I was so sure that they wouldn't reply because you know what it's like. You've been there. You go, I'm in jail. No one's going to want to sort of talk to me, you know, and they're not going to believe that I'm what I'm in for. Because I did say that if it's of any consolation, I'm neither in for violence or sexual offences, hoping that might just make them
a bit more palatable, innit? Yeah.
And whatever I put in the letter, it worked. And then that book that I was on about earlier, when the tutor gave me the book to read, it was them artists that turned me around afterwards because I'd had the confidence to write to these artists in that book. And I wrote to, there was 32 artists altogether. So I thought I'd just write to all 32 of them.
We've got time in there.
One of them's got a, you know, I thought I'm going to fish with a net instead of a rod, you know. Yeah.
And how many got back to you?
28.
Wow.
28 out of 32.
Wow. What else did they kind of like do for you and give for you like?
On the whole, properly turn my life around. Because it was at the time when I would go in, I want to change. I want to come out the gate a different person that went in, you know. And I was trying to change my life, didn't know how to. Excuse me. And I was sort of looking at myself. I was trying to unpick my own personality, get rid of all the nasty and horrible bits that was in me because I was a different person then. Try and sort of varnish the good bits that I could find, you know. And
trying to be your best self.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I mentioned this just the other day. I ended up with like a bucket full of bad stuff and like an egg cup full of good stuff. And I'm like, Christ almighty, is that what I've become, you know? And so I just sort of tried to polish what was left. And these people were a part of it. And when I'm saying to them, well, you know, I'm saying, like, I've got 5.5 years left. I want to try and do what I do and like, possibly even go to university. I didn't know what that meant. No one in my family or even on the estate had been to university unless they were robbing it. But yeah, and they were going like, because these were the people who were like I mentioned, Tracey Emin, Sarah Lucas, Gavin Turk, people who you may not know, but you may have seen their work.
They're the YBAs, isn't it?
That's the ones, the YBAs. Thank you very much. Yeah. And they was going like, well, we're trying to upset this old way of doing things. They were like punk, like wanting
yeah.
to change it. And they were going, we need people exactly like you here.
Love that.
And then one of them said, like, you know, you're with me. And it made me feel like I was on the guest list to the art world, you know. I thought, well, I'm allowed into it. And if anyone says I'm not, I'll just go, it's all right, I'm on his guest list, you know.
That's
you
so
can't
cool.
stop
That
me.
is cool. You're having famous like pen pals. Like,
They weren't at the time. They was well known within the art world.
okay.
But now they're like the A-listers, you know.
Yeah.
That must have, you know, done wonders for your confidence as well.
Definitely.
Especially when you're in that position inside. Like we both know how that feels, and it's hard. It's hard work. That must have been.
It was the confidence more than anything, because you know, I'm sort of setting a ceiling for myself, and every now and then I'm looking over that ceiling, you know, and I'm going, oh, this is all right, and then but then I put a new ceiling in front of myself.
Well, that's really lovely to hear.
It was amazing. They
crazy.
absolutely changed my life.
Wow.
Absolutely.
In it.
Yeah, it really is.
Strangers, man. That's the thing. Because I could have been any old loony sitting in there, you know. I could have been a real nasty piece of work for all they knew.
But I think they appreciated the effort that you took. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that shows. And for me, looking from the outside in, that shows. If I was to receive a letter, it shows that someone that wants to change their life, that wants to better themselves.
Was it just letters that they got from you, or did you get to send anything, I don't know, to make them understand you a bit more? Was it just through your writing, or?
I was just doing writing. They were sending me through books, and when I'm replying, I mean, that was when you was allowed a paper letter, you know, and they was allowed to send books into me, which obviously you can't do now.
Yeah.
But I'd reply, I'd read everything they sent to me, and it was like the arty language is a bit up itself, you know, or sometimes. And for someone who doesn't understand that language yet, it might as well have been German, you know what I mean? And I'm reading it and there's words I've never even heard of. So I've got a dictionary and I'm looking up this word and I've got to try and remember what it means because it was jumping up and down in the text, you know? And it was a bit difficult in that response. But they was just going, yeah, you're all right. And they kept writing to me.
Love that.
And it weren't like they'd write me a letter, I'd write them a letter. It might be I wouldn't hear from them for 3 months, and then they call it a catalogue from when it's a book from an exhibition, you know, like a magazine from an exhibition. So then, like a few months later, out the blue, I might just get a catalogue, and it said, "Oh, I had an exhibition last week. This is the catalogue from it. I thought you might want it."
It's kind of all you need when you're inside,
And I'll
isn't
tell you
it?
what was good though. I'd get a letter from, or this happened a few times. I'd get a letter with a parcel as well of books, magazines and cuttings and whatever. And it'd be from someone I didn't even know.
Wow.
And they'd go, I was in the bar with so-and-so the other day. They mentioned you and I thought you might like to see my work.
That is
And
cool.
it's
so
beautiful.
cool.
Yeah, that's really nice.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Connecting.
The art community sounds like my sort of people, man.
Oh,
They're
it does
cool.
actually
Yeah.
too.
They're cool.
Yeah.
So, Gary, how would you describe your art?
Sort of conceptual. It all of mine leads back to prison, and I want to try to make my work. I was just talking about this just the other day. I've got myself in a position now where I want academics to understand my artwork, and you know, seasoned artists, people who are in the game and that's their job, that's their career. I want them to understand my work. But if a guy sitting in a prison cell doesn't understand it, then it's not worked for me either.
I like that.
So I've got to try and make both understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And because of where the guys are, where I've come from and what my work's about, I've only got to explain it. It's very complex work, it can be. And I've only got to explain it when I go in to do prison talks. I explain my work a little bit and they're all going, I get it. And I've only got to explain it as much as to the academics as well, where I'm coming from with it. They get it and they get it.
So you're doing a good job there then.
It feels like it's working.
That's a difficult bridge to gap though, or gap to bridge, should I say?
I've made a little bit of a rod for my own back, really. But if it doesn't work for those guys, then
What's
it's
the
not
point?
working for me.
I hear you.
Yeah, good.
That's a lovely quote, man. We got to clip that one. We got to clip that one. So then you've touched on it already, but what did art do for you inside then?
It changed me and my personality 100%. 180 degrees. Even if you look at today, the children I've got, they wouldn't be the children I would have had. They would have been photocopies of the old me, you know. I've got good, fun, honest, loving, caring children. They would have been just little mini me's if I was still the old me.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with them sort of kids, but I've changed and, you know, they've brought them along with me. I've got a completely different outlook to life.
That's amazing.
And it wasn't that before.
I mean, you named you had some really great words describing your kids, but you're describing you, right? So that's you now.
Yeah, I'm a different person. You know, I ain't going to put those labels on
He's
me.
modest, man. He's modest.
Yeah.
But
you said that they grew up, you know, they are that because of you now, because of what you've taught them and shown them. So,
and obviously I can't take all the credit. My other half, you know, she's done 75% of it.
No, that's a really beautiful thing. What kind of response do you get from your work? From is it people inside that you get it from as well, or just people out on the outside? And what do they say?
Well, it isn't just. I showed you a drawing earlier that I'd done made of the tally marks that you might find on a wall in a prison cell. That's one side of it, but I do a whole lot of different other work, and I would use any materials. It's not always drawing or painting. I mean, one of the works I made a little while ago was a skip. Just like a skip you get outside your house.
Yeah.
And that had a message aside it. That was to do with rehabilitation. And it was called domestic waste. And that was 18 months ago. And I still get emails about that work now, because I was saying that a skip is roughly the size of a prison cell. Well, not roughly. When I was looking into it, I got given a skip that was 3.5 metres.
Yeah.
By 1.8 metres. I went on a government website to see how big a prison cell was. And on this website, which was a government website, they showed two standard cells. One was of new stock, one was of Victorian stock. The Victorian stock was exactly the same size as a skip. Not a massive big skip, one you'd have outside your house.
Wow.
One of them big yellow skips. And I was going to put all the furniture, I was going to get the furniture from local prisons and build a cell on a platform on top of it. But all I'd done in the end, I just even cut that away. I got the actual diagram from the website, the government website, and just created that on this thing. And that equates to 6.3 square metres, right? A prison cell. And it was designed for one person and it holds two adults now. And obviously you've got all your furniture in there and it works out you've got about an 18-inch gap down the centre, you know. But that aside, it equates to 6.3 square metres.
Nice.
Then I went on to another website and I'd always wondered about how much room animals need compared to us. And then I found a website, man, government website again. I made sure it weren't just a sort of
random
joeblogs.com, a proper government website. And it said that a dog weighing 35 kilos or above being held for procedure has got to have 8 square metres.
Two whole square metres more than a prison cell.
1.7 to be precise.
1.7
for two adults.
That's nuts. We're talking like Pentonvilles and the Chelmsford, the old Victorian.
That's the one.
That's crazy.
And so what I've done, the skip, I added, it was just less than a metre I had to add to it to make it up to 8 square metres, and I take that off on the floor. And then I put all the information of what I just told you, I put it a bit more concisely on the side of the skip. And at the very bottom, I put how we're supposed to expect these guys to be rehabilitated when we treat them worse than dogs or treat them worse than animals. I can't remember the thing. But it was that little killer line at the bottom. And then probably at least twice a month, I'll have a message ping through to me on Instagram or wherever, and it'll be a picture of a skip going, can't believe 2 people live in that, you know.
Yeah.
That is actually crazy.
And that's what I'm talking about, the conceptual art element.
So it's all about cutting away. The conceptual thing is about cutting away as much visual information as possible. Because if I would have put all the furniture there, it would have been a different artwork.
Yeah.
Because I just put the government diagram on there, it just stripped it away.
Home more.
And I called it domestic waste as well, because that's what goes in the skip and domestic waste is, the guys in jail.
Yeah.
What you can explain through art. It's
incredible.
And
well, you've got to give.
Thanks for putting it out there.
You've got to give the viewer enough room to make their little story in their mind. You know, that's why you've got to have it minimal so there's gaps in it that people can fill the gaps.
The cells are small. I remember trying to move. This is what drove me to actually doing more exercise and PT, and because I couldn't move, and I remember walking up and down. It was like 7 steps each way.
Wow, you remember the steps?
I remember because I was counting. Yeah, because I thought this is crazy. But yeah, putting it on a piece of artwork like that, I want to have a look at that. That's wicked.
That's good.
So Gary, let's take it back to how you actually ended up inside. You've touched on what your conviction was a little bit. Can you just explain it again?
Yeah, so I'd always been, since I was at school, dealing in fake clothing. And I went up from just selling it to mates to then supplying the guys who were selling it to their mates, and then in the end I was supplying those ones. So I was fairly way up the ladder, but I got to a point that if I would have gone up another rung on that ladder, I could expect prison time if it come on top. Okay. So I stayed on that level, but at the same time I was also running security, bodyguarding, anything big ugly fat bloke might do in them days.
Yourself a disservice, man.
I was going to say, Gary,
doing yourself a disservice.
All right then, a big ugly bloke from that area would do.
A big, handsome, great, funny guy.
So it was, so I was doing minding, bodyguarding, debt collecting, all of that junk, on the side. So at any given moment, the stuff I was getting up to, I could have got a fair bit of jail time.
You was involved a bit. You was dibble-dabbling.
Involved with, but on this particular day, I wasn't even collecting any clothing from these guys. I started working with these new guys, and I had some mates up in Liverpool. So I was going to spend the weekend up there. So Saturday morning, I was on my way. But the guy I was getting it from, he asked if I could take the labels to his guys in Birmingham. So I was like, yeah, sure. And he'd give me a few £100 for me labour, which would, pay for a night out up in Liverpool. So I went and picked the bags up, put them in the back of my car, went to pull out. And as I'm reversing out the space, I could see in my rear view mirror this police van chasing this blue Vauxhall motor. And they've come into the car park. So I've looked over this shoulder and I could see this car coming in, and it sort of skidded up, 10 or 15 feet away. So was the police van. And I thought, this is a bit exciting for a Saturday morning. But then this woman got out the car who was about 40-ish, and I thought, she don't look right for someone getting away from the old bill, And then a guy has got out wearing a tie, and bearing in mind, this is all within a couple of seconds. So I'm like, what's going on here? And then the woman's running across to me shouting, and I'm thinking she ain't going to carjack me, that ain't going to happen. But then all of a sudden, my back window's gone through. Then I've heard just loads of noise, and then it's like when it comes on top. And I was like, man, this ain't gonna. So I've just And then they've put me in the back of the car, and they're getting the bags out the boot of my car, and it was 2 big oldals, and I thought they're going to be proper gutted that they've wasted all this time. Who's the fool here? They've got me down the police station. They're just booking me in. And they've asked me name and address already. I've given them that on the way, And then they said, this is Gary Mansfield. He's being charged with being knowingly concerned in the importation of drugs, namely diamorphine. Yeah, it turned out to be £4.2 million worth of Class A.
Wow.
Gary, you literally just have me like...
That's a movie scene. That's a movie scene.
So you had no idea that was...
No.
That was in there, and it was 4.2 million.
4.2.
Oh, Gary.
Nothing I've ever been proud of,
Yeah.
But then that's the quandary. What do I do a year later when I get to court? 5 of us were nicked altogether.
So did you plead guilty, not guilty?
Oh, no, not guilty. But the thing was, because I've been to court loads of times, never told the truth, right? But this time, I thought, like this time, it's a little bit different.
Yes,
you know what I mean? This ain't a tear.
It's a squeaky bum. Yeah.
So I knew I was looking at like 18, it's 50 kilos of gear. And so I've told the truth about the situation. I'm going up to visit these people. All I've not done is given the names.
Yeah, of course.
Even though they've dropped me in it. And
kept it strum.
So I'm standing up in the dock, and at the time I was having it with some, I mean, they're not around anymore, but they was like the old school big time villains, you know.
Yeah.
And they was going to me, just get up in the dock, point the finger at him and go, that's the bloke who set me up. And I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And they was like, well, he's done it to you for, you know, for no reason, just for a little bit of greed, rather than having to pay someone a few grand, you know. So he said, just get up and point at him. I went, I can't. He went, well, you do a lot of bird then. And I was contemplating at the time whether to do that. And I'd had so many of that old school going, go on,
do it.
just
Yeah,
do
it's fine.
If any of them have got a problem with it, point them to us. I'm like, yeah, that's easy to say.
Isn't it?
But in the doc, when the time come, and he said, is Sid in this, like this specific, Sid weren't even his real name, you know. Is Sid in the dock or in the courtroom today? And I've looked over to him, and again, this is within a few seconds. I've looked over to him, and he's just put his head down. And I went, no. And then he's looked up. He didn't look at me. He looked at his family and went,
relieved. Yeah.
And I just thought that was the turning point.
Did he get off?
He got off. He walked, and I knew that I'd set myself down the river for it, you know. And I looked at him, and I just thought, you horrid person. You know, he can't even look at me and with a little bit of respect, knowing what I've just done.
Isn't it?
Yeah, so going back to what you know, how you use your time in prison, what did you focus on? What did you do?
Well, as I say, first year was on remand. My first 6 months in Swaleside, that was just, I was still the old person then, hadn't discovered art, and probably maybe even 9 months. That was just potty. That was just, I was still the old person.
And you're still getting into the sentence, innit? You're not like...
And that little speck of light was way, way in the distance, so I didn't give a monkeys, you know. So there was a lot of prison stuff going on, and I was involved in that. And then I was bitter and twisted about the guys who set me up. So, and it wasn't until a mate of mine turned up who, I mean, he had a reputation for being a bit naughty, you know. And he went to me, them guys who set you up. And I said, every night. I said, it makes me go to sleep of what I'm going to do to them. When I get out, I'm going to go and find them. I'm going to do this. I know where I'm going to take them, what I'm going to do to them. And then as I'm telling him, he's like looking at me and he's going, "Girl, mate, you got to stop that. It's you're going to do a hard sentence." And I was like, I've got to pull away from that.
How do you let that go then? What's that like, letting that go?
Well, that took years, to be honest. That bit of me almost getting a comfort from that was a bit psycho.
But that's what prison does to you though, right? When you're in them four walls, it happens.
But it was, and I know it's like a bit of a cliche, but it's as if it was like a nursery rhyme I'm like rocking myself to sleep with. And then when I get up in the morning, bang, it's there again. And then I just put it to the side. So I'm just living with this hate all the time, you know? And it weren't until, and I know I'm making this art sound like the saviour, but it pretty much was. It wasn't until that come in, and I'm like, how can I drag all this stuff? I'm trying to be a new person. How can I drag the old world, you know, of two old halls full of the old world into my new world? What's the point?
Doesn't make sense.
No, I'm going to just be a bitter and twisted crank in this new world. And it ain't going to work, you know?
Yeah, I hear you.
Wow.
So that's the bit where I said I had to look at myself, and this wasn't overnight, you know, this was probably over a year or so. And it was that when I'm looking at people and I'm going, I don't like that about him. And I'm like, well, I've got a bit of that in me.
Yeah.
I've got to try and change that, because that's no good. If I don't like it, other people aren't going to like it. So I'm trying to change all these little aspects of my personality, you know. And then you get to a point when you go, like I said earlier, that bucket full of bad points, egg cup full of good points. And it got to the point when, even though I was always a strong character, I was like, am I really that bad? Is there so little good in me? And you question yourself, well, what's the point of me being here? What am I contributing to anyone with just this little bit of good in me? And that's when I started, as I said earlier, just trying to polish those little bits that I did have left, and, you know, sort of coming to terms with what was and trying to change.
I think that speaks to your artistry and your creativity, the way you've just described that, you know, a bucket load. That's conceptual art in it. In itself. Maybe that's another piece that you could possibly do. The old you in the bucket and the good bit of you that's now
Little nuggets of gold.
You know what I mean? Little nuggets of gold that go into this big nugget of...
You ain't having no copyright on that.
You know what I'm saying? You know when you heard this first, right? Nah. But how you're putting that metaphor is so strong.
And art really did change you.
Yeah, definitely. And not just the art, but it was the people as well. Because to be honest, I loved the criminal world. I had... Money was all right.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Good fun.
Yep.
There was girls. It was everything.
It's the lifestyle, isn't
yeah,
it?
it was good. It was.
It's telling it how it is.
I was a mid-20s guy. It was good. It was fun. I was knocking about with celebrities. Yeah, it was good fun. But what I needed was, and there's also that structure.
Yeah.
You've got people at the top. You've got a ladder to walk up or work up even, sorry. There's rules, although, you know, once I was away, I discovered that them old rules, that's no one abides by those. That's all just
the honour amongst thieves and all that,
you know? Yeah, they go to page 1 and that's it.
Yeah.
But at the time when I wanted to change is when these artists come in, and there's a structure there as well. Although I'm right at the very bottom rung of the ladder. Well, I ain't even at the bottom rung. I'm holding the ladder for people who are on the bottom rung, you know. But there's a structure. It's a bigger ladder, you know. It's treacherous. There's unknown stuff up every rung.
It's a more
ladder.
exciting ladder, isn't it?
I didn't know that at the time. It was a scary ladder.
Do you think it is? Do you think it's a more exciting ladder?
It's yes and no.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the excitement isn't there. It's there in different ways now. I get excited by going to a friend's private view or having a new body of work or showing people new work. Whereas before I used to get excited by whatever, you know.
It's two different forms. It's two different.
It's different.
I get you.
Do you agree with that as well?
100% that resonates with me fully because that old life is like the fast life, innit? To say
it's like listening to techno and listening to jazz.
Yes.
They've both got their they've both got their
tempos, innit? Yeah, but it's different, innit? Yeah,
we haven't had this.
What smacks is we had jazz on earlier. Like, we had some Miles Davis on. Miles Davis, innit? Yeah, so that's cool, man. Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, I was gonna touch on release and what that was like for you, and if you saw what were the changes that you saw?
There was lots. One thing that got me is that just before my arrest, I think it was the Friday, like I got arrested on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
On the Friday night, I went into a petrol station. It was down this side road near me to get my petrol. 7 years later, on release, maybe a little while after, it might have even been while I was out on town visits. And
from DCAT, yeah.
I went past that road, or I went past the petrol station, and it was now closed down, and it had a tree in the middle of it that was grown.
That's crazy.
And I was like,
change number 1, new tree.
But there's a tree that has grown while I've been away. And I'm like, man, that was one of the things that made me realise
how long you've been away.
Yeah, that is actually
not my nieces and nephews who were now up here, you know, and they was not even there.
And the tree wasn't fake.
And the tree wasn't fake. The petrol station was shut down. And it had a bush, you know, but it was bigger than me.
Wow. Talk us through that first day of release. What was that first day like?
Well, see, mine's a little bit different from most. So I was meant to be going out at sort of like 8:15.
Yeah, as you do.
Being released. And I was in Latchmere House.
Oh, that's the one that's closed down now, isn't it?
Closed. Oh, it's gone. It's just a posh.
Was that the mansion?
That mansion house is still there.
Okay.
But it's now a really posh housing. I went and had a little drive through it about 6 months ago. Just casing the joint. I weren't casing the joint.
Maybe it's for the next piece of art, you know.
But so I was getting released from Richmond. From Latchmere House in Richmond, and then security have shut the place down. So I can't get out. I'm now doing my time. I'm doing my free time in jail.
Yeah.
Right? So I've had to wait until I think it's like 9:15.
That's
5 past 9.
The longest wait in your life.
When it just. But I left there and I had to get to the university because I was already enrolled in university about 2.5 weeks before I got out of jail.
So you did sign up for university?
I did get into university.
Cool, man.
Study what?
Fine art.
Of course.
Oh,
So what
sorry.
else? What
Hold on a
else?
second, I have to ask the question.
What else, Jules?
Well, it could, I don't know.
Right, so I applied to go to prison. I applied to go to university, right? And got in. Got into uni, got into University of East London. So I was leaving for 2.5 weeks. I'm leaving Latchmere at like 8:30 in the mornings, 8 o'clock, whatever it was, getting on the train, going all the way down
that's
to...
that's the other end.
It's literally the other end of the
To
line.
university on the same day?
So I was doing that for a fortnight.
Okay.
And we was only just getting used to the university in that. On my day of release, I got out of there at 9:05, 9:15, and I had my first lecture at 11 o'clock.
That's nuts.
That is crazy.
So I had to go, and I had to get okayed from parole,
From probation. Okay.
to go, because normally you've got to go out and you've got a couple of hours, haven't you? So I said, look, I've got my first lecture. And they said, yeah, go for it and come and see us at Last
sweet.
Knockings, you know.
Yeah.
So my first day was getting out of there, going to that lecture.
That's nuts.
And then later
what's
on...
the feeling? Yeah, what's that feeling? You've just been released and now you're sitting in a lecture.
Well, I didn't have time for it because I'd already been getting out, going to university. Okay. It was just like another day.
Okay.
It was only when I was walking out.
So were you in DCAT?
Yeah.
In Rottle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from Latchmere. Latchmere House is one of the old DCATs. It's
okay.
Not gone
all right.
anymore.
So you were...
So it was just like another day until I didn't have to go back. And then I was like...
What do I do?
Yeah.
Oh, is that when it hits you?
I'm sitting there I had to be at my mum's house. I'm sitting there with my mum. And she's going, oh, do you want this? Do you want that? Then there's family coming round and everyone wants to see me. And I'm like, I can't have this. I just want to go.
Too much, isn't it?
It's overwhelming.
How did you deal with that? Like, did you get any help with that kind of stuff? Or
I was up again next morning to go to university, so I didn't have time,
Kind of just get distracted.
Do you think that played a part in getting you back to like used to civilization and society again? Do you think it helped?
But in my second year, that's when I had a little bit of a meltdown.
Okay.
Because I think what I should have done was give myself a little bit of time to be free, rather than go from one establishment straight into another. I never give myself any freedom. All of a sudden I was in this liberal world where I haven't got to go back to prison. Just once a week I've got to go to probation. And I didn't have time to.
But
to
did you finish and complete uni?
I did. Yeah.
Come on, that's what we want to hear.
Yeah, love that.
I did.
Official fine artist. Do you get the letters on your name? And
Yeah.
Jeez, what's the letters?
Just
Is it
BA.
Bachelor of Arts? Yeah.
But I always say I've got letters at one end and numbers at the other.
Yeah.
Well,
No, that's dope.
Yeah, well
Isn't
done.
it?
Really good.
I heard somewhere, because I was doing a bit of research, as you do,
Okay.
being the presenters we are, and I heard you say somewhere else that you almost gave up on art. Is this true?
I did give up on art
What, you actually gave up?
for about 7 years again,
Wow.
funnily enough. Because I started a master's degree. Straight after I finished my BA, you've got like a couple of months before university starts again, and that's when everyone applies for their masters. So I applied for a master's and got in, because now I had the bug. I wanted to do a master's. I wanted to do a PhD. That was the dream, just to keep going and going.
Yeah.
I wanted to be Dr. LX2527,
Yeah.
But so that's what I started doing. And I was doing it for about 3 months. And the girl I was with, who I've been with for a while, she fell pregnant. And I was like, what do I do? I can't afford a baby and a master's. Couldn't put the baby on eBay.
Life
Wouldn't
choices.
have
Yeah.
it. Got taken down.
I tried.
So I thought, well, I've just got to stop the masters. I've got to be a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be the person. I mean, that's all what I always wanted to be. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to have kids. So I wanted to take responsibility.
Yeah.
So I stopped the masters, dropped out, went and got a job on a building site. I was still doing a little bit of art, but it weren't, at this point, I wanted to make big art. I wanted to make statements. I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to make the name that I'd been training for all of them years, even in prison. I wanted to make my name. But now I couldn't, because I didn't have the time to do it. I didn't have the space to do it. I didn't have the money to do it. And as much as you only, this is another story that we may possibly come to. As much as you do only need a pen and paper, that weren't what I wanted to do. I wanted to make statements. I wanted to let people out there listen to me and I wanted to make them aware of the people behind me, as in jail.
Yeah.
And couldn't do it. And it was really frustrating. So I threw a little bit of a tantrum with myself. I just ignored art altogether. I didn't go to galleries anymore.
Wow.
I didn't read about art. I only kept in touch with one of the people from uni, who's still my best mate now. We didn't talk about art, or rarely.
That's like having a breakup.
That's how I speak of it.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I remember broke up with a girl when I was on a bus, and I saw her after a few weeks, and I had that like knot in my stomach. And that's the knot I was getting with this art, you know. When I was thinking about it, or I see a program on telly, I have that little knot inside. So I just went, nah, jog it on. You know what blokes are like. I was going to say what we're like, but you just sort of cut away things to sort of carry on, you know. So that's what I've done for years, and you didn't have anything to do with it, didn't watch a program, didn't read about it, didn't make it, just forgot about it, become working on a building site, working in a printing plant, making newspapers.
How did you get back?
Good.
How did you guys make up?
Right, this is another good story, right? So my mate Lee, who I was talking about, who I was at uni with, he was then working in a school in Islington.
Okay.
And there's a place in Islington called the Foundling Museum, which centuries ago, it was to look after, have you heard of foundlings? It's when parents, mums, used to leave the baby they can't look after, leave it on the street, and it's the baby has been found. So and then there was a foundling, it wasn't a museum then, but that's where the foundlings went, like an orphanage sort of thing. But now it's something completely different. So anyway, my mate Lee said that he's been telling his friends at work about me, and they'd like to meet me, and would I come out for a drink with them? And this, you know, he'd been telling them about me for a while and my story and that sort of thing. So I thought, oh, why not? They was art teachers, but I thought I can stomach that, you know. So I've gone down there, and he said, we met him in this bar, and he went, oh, we're going to a thing round the corner. And I went, oh, what's that? He went, oh, it's just this little talk. I went, oh, yeah. So I'm just going along with him, chatting to him and his two friends. Then we got to the Foundling Museum, and I knew what it was. I'd never been in there at this point. And then I saw outside that it's a talk by, do you know Tracey Emin?
Yeah.
Right, so it's a talk by Tracey Emin. And I looked at Lee, and
he set you up.
Yeah, Lee's like, we're here now, you know. Now, Tracey wrote to me when I was away as well. I'd met her when I was at uni, you know, so we knew each other. So we're in this place, and it's all properly posh people, you know. I'm proper bringing the house prices down, just walking in there, you know what I mean? But I'm standing in there, and I can see her chatting to people, and like, as we're talking, I'm looking over, and I'm just thinking about, like, you know, we'd had a few laughs and whatever, and looked over, and then all of a sudden I was going to say our eyes met. Now she sort of looked over and seen me, and I just raised my eyebrows, or she like had a little quizzical like I know that face, you know, and I just raised my eyebrows, and she went, she sort of snaked her way towards me. She went, where you been? I've not seen you for years. And then I've told her this noble story about having a baby and not being able to afford it, and that knot in my stomach. Yeah. And she went, so you've turned your back on art? The thing that changed your life, you've turned your back on. And I went, now I'm getting it put on me, right, by this
Tracey Emin,
powerful woman. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't have the money or the space. And I felt like a little boy, you know what I mean, explaining something to my mum.
Yeah.
And she went, so you've turned your back on it. She went, and she's the one who said to me, all you need is a pencil and paper. You don't need money. You don't need space. Pencil and paper. You can write your ideas down until you've got the money and space to make them, then build them. She went, and even then, you still don't need a pencil and paper. You can just think about art. Yeah. You haven't even thought, because I said, I didn't think about it. She went, you can just think.
Goosebumps.
Right, so, and she was getting louder and like having a pop at me, and I went, all right, I'll make art. I will make art. And then when she's got up to give her talk, everyone's there, and I'm like leaning at the back. And then she went, blah, blah, blah. And then she turned it around to talking about people who have like taken art out of their life, and then just literally pointed me out, and I had all of these posh people looking at me, and I'm like, all right. And then not next day, but I started thinking about it again, getting the juices flowing, start doing things, and then
Big up Tracey Emin.
Yes, absolutely
Yes.
love that.
What a story, man.
Yeah.
What a story. I've asked you earlier, but we know what art did for you, but did that change for you once you got out? What art did for you inside?
Well, I was still in that world. I'd been learning how to make stuff, like learning the techniques, and it was hard on my own. Then I get to uni, and in uni they don't show you the techniques, but they develop your mind, make you think in different ways. So I didn't really have time to realise what art had done for me until a few years later, which was like 2016, when I was putting the first show together, my first big show.
That collection.
And I had loads of artists involved. And I remember I was just literally sitting at the kitchen table while my other half was doing the dinner. I'm going through this list of artists that I've invited on to my very first show to make my step back into the art world. This is maybe a year after I've come across Tracey, you know.
It's the big debut, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got this list of artists who are all going to be part of this project that I'm doing. And I'm just looking at this project, and it's like, I had it in my head that I was going to invite people. Do you know the Turner Prize?
Yes.
Right, so I was going to invite Turner Prize winners, like the people that broke to me when I was away, right the way down. And by this point, I'd been running a homeless art group as well for a while. And I thought, I'm going to include one of the homeless guys, and make sure they're next to one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to get a prisoner involved. Again, hang them next to or get them involved somehow with the big boys. And then in between, I had a student there as well. And then every rung of the ladder in between. Yeah. But when I'm looking at these names of the people I've got, I'm looking at them and I'm like, Christ almighty, it hit home just how vast and big this project was with the artists I've got involved.
That's incredible.
And man, I looked at it and I was like, that's when I looked at me and gone, I've done it. Sort of half made it.
Yeah. No, you have. Yeah.
Even though I hadn't produced or sold a bit of artwork at this point for years, since pretty much I left uni.
But I think the recognition from your peers is what matters as well within that industry.
Well, I'd come up with a concept and I'd asked artists to contribute to this show. And like I was going to I was going to damage their artwork. That was what I'm asking them to do. So I thought a lot of artists do prints like we spoke about earlier, and they're worth like a couple of £100. And I thought, well, they might give me one of those to damage. The very first person I asked, other than, I mentioned the first two artists I wrote to, Ray Richardson, them two are still my mates now. Ray's one of my closest mates still to this day. I spoke to him first about my idea. He said, go for it. Then there's an artist called Sarah Lucas. She was the second one I contacted. And when I spoke to her about this idea that I had, she said, I'll make a piece of work for you.
Oh, sick.
Now, I knew that weren't going to be £200. It turned out to be 14 grand that she gave me to damage.
Wow.
And then once I had her on board, she went, have you spoke to Gavin, who's Gavin Turk? So I went down to see Gavin. I said, look, I've told Sarah about this. He went, yeah, I'll give you something as well. And then I had them two big uns on board. Then I'll just go to anyone. I go, I've got these two on board. Yep, I'll be a part of it.
Has your past ever been like a problem in the art world?
Twice. Only twice. Most of the time, it's an asset.
Wow.
Only because of the approach that I've got with it. If I was to go in there going, I've done a 14 and I've done this and I've done that, people would just go, oh, yeah.
Jog along,
But because I am the way I am, you've got, if you're showing straight, honest people that you've changed and you've taken ownership of what you've done. Even though I was saying I was set up, I've never gone, I'm a victim because I was set up. I could have gone and got a 14 on any given weekend before I got nicked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Honestly, the stuff I was getting involved with.
Thanks for sharing all those stories.
Man. Oh, sorry, man. I do go up on that.
No, man, loved it. Yeah. Loved it. I'm sure everyone listening and watching loves it too. What we like to do on the sit down is, signpost organisations that potentially can help people who leave prison. Are there any organisations that supported you when you left prison?
Kersler.
Okay.
Kersler are my saviour.
Oh.
For anyone that doesn't know Kersler, everyone should know Kersler. Every year they put on an exhibition in London, and they have satellite ones going around the country. The biggest prison arts charity definitely in Britain, may even be in Europe.
Wow.
When my work, when I was in prison, went in a Koestler exhibition, and I had photographs that my mum sent in of people looking at my artwork.
Wow.
Man, that really done something for me. And I still get that feeling today when someone's looking and admiring at something I've done. And they were a massive part of me while I was away, because I was entering every year. When I come out, I went to the exhibition every year. When I started doing an art podcast, I had them on the podcast. And then they was aware that, like, when Koestler's on, and I know this sounds bonkers, they have like 400 artworks in there every year. I'd always, since I've been out, you're able to go and write. I don't know if you're aware, there's a little bit of card. You can write a little message to the person who's inside, the artist, or the author or whomever. And I would sit there speaking to the guys who were working there. I'd write to everyone.
Wow.
I'd go down there like 8 or 9 times for the day, while it's on, write to everyone. And I become that sort of unknown person that always turns up every year and writes to everyone. When I'd done like an interview with them, I mentioned that I go down there and she was like, "Oh, that's you, is it?" And
connecting the dots.
Then they invited me on to be a director or a trustee of Koestler, and proudest moment, other than my kids, of course.
Yes, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's wicked.
Koestler,
and all the information for Koestler will be in our show notes, so you can check them out. There's also Prodigal Arts, who are a charity that provide opportunities for people inside and when they leave prison to produce and sell their artwork that they create during these art sessions. And they will also be in the description below, so check them out.
You know that we love to hear from you guys. So have a look at some of Gary's artwork. The Skip.
Yes, check it out, man.
Have a look at that. Let us know your thoughts, and you can pop that in the comments below.
Drop them comments.
And also tell us if you've ever got involved with any art in prison. We would love to know that. Have you ever?
I did, and since you mentioned Koestler, I was doing graphic design in High Point a few years ago, and I did some piece with like Photoshop and putting like stars behind like some faces. I scanned in some image from an art book. And the tutor was like, "You should enter that into Koestler." So I entered it. Didn't hear nothing back. But I did enter Koestler, and that's when I first heard about Koestler. So yeah, I did. What about you? Did you?
Me?
Arts? Yeah.
I did little bits here and there. To be fair,
you was graffitiing up the walls.
No. You have a lot of time inside, right? So there were times where I would be writing a lot and colouring in a lot and drawing. I can't draw, but I did. Okay. I did bits and bobs.
That's one thing, if I could just say, it doesn't matter about your ability.
Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't
100%.
matter if you haven't got to be a Rembrandt.
Listen, I admit it helped me a lot. Like, it really, really did. Yeah. Picking up the pen and doing that. But I can't say, I created something like
basically, Jules is whack. I'm joking, Jules.
That you can create. Yeah. But yeah, 100% it helped me loads. So yeah, we really want to hear if art was something that you got involved with inside. Drop the comments below, get in touch. We'd love to hear. And you can also get in touch with us by DMing us on Twitter and Instagram at AfterPrisonPod. Or if you prefer to send an email, you can email us at podcasts@prison.radio. Or if you prefer to write to us, you can write to us at Life After Prison, National Prison Radio, HMP Brixton, London, SW25XF. But we've also got a website, lifeafterprisonpod.com, and you can even drop us a voice note on there. So please get in touch with us. So thank you very much for listening. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Today. It's been emotional. Yeah. So interesting. Thank you. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Sweet.